In the middle of Rome, Italy, a businessman named Claudio arrives at his company's building and goes to the elevator, where he receives a call from his wife Lorena, who says she is extremely frightened because several strange attacks are happening around the city for no apparent reason. The woman explains that due to the number of clashes that are taking place, numerous streets around Rome have been blocked off, and the government has created some bans to control the situation. Suddenly, the lights in the car start flashing, forcing the elevator to stop moving. Claudio then warns his wife about what has just happened, and Lorena asks him to do the shopping at the supermarket after work, since she couldn't get there because of the traffic. Upon hearing this, the businessman becomes enraged, and before ending the call, he scolds his wife, saying that he already has too many problems to solve in his company. Shortly afterwards, Claudio contacted the building's security team, who asked him to wait for a few minutes so that they could investigate the situation. Realizing that he is going to be late for his meeting, the businessman calls his assistant Sarah and asks if his clients are still waiting for him to arrive. The woman tells him that she is having great difficulty keeping the clients calm, but Claudio orders the secretary to wait for a few more minutes, as he will soon be able to get to his office. While waiting for the elevator to be repaired, the man hears footsteps outside the car. Desperate, Claudio cries out to be rescued from there, but he gets no response and is indignant at being ignored by those on the other side. As time goes by, Sarah gets in touch with her boss again, and tells him that she is getting desperate, as the client is getting more and more impatient. Furious at all the delays his meeting is suffering, Claudio bangs on the door of the car and starts threatening those outside, ordering them to open the elevator immediately. Realizing that he will have to deal with this situation alone, the man presses the emergency button once more and asks the attendant to give him the contact details of his colleagues who are carrying out the roof repairs. When he gets through, Claudio scolds the security team for all the problems they are causing, but at that moment, the employees start shouting in desperation, causing the call to be interrupted. As he has no other way of getting help, the businessman removes his jacket and decides that he will try to open the cabin doors with his bare hands. After a few minutes of effort, Claudio manages to partially open the elevator, and takes advantage of the gap to shout for help, but he gets no response. Believing that his employees had left work early because their boss hadn't shown up, the man became even angrier and tried to get through the opening anyway. However, nothing seems to work, and Claudio remains trapped in the elevator, causing him to become increasingly hopeless. A few minutes later, the businessman receives a call from his wife, who is extremely frightened, saying that a sinister man is knocking on the door. Worried, Claudio asks the woman to call the authorities, but she says that the phones and cell phones are out of signal, so she has no way of calling for help. In order to calm his wife down, the man orders her to lock herself in her room and stay hidden while he asks Stefano, his driver, to go to her. Claudio then contacts his employee, asking him to go to his home to calm Lorena down and make sure there are no intruders around. After this, the businessman talks to his wife again, and the woman reveals that she is following the numerous emergency reports on the news, where she discovers that hundreds of people are going mad. Lorena explains that the attacks and collective outbreaks are increasing more and more, and that they are occurring in all areas of Rome, as if a criminal organization were trying to take over the city. Claudio then says that Stefano will arrive in a few minutes, and begs the woman to try to remain calm, saying that these reports are nothing more than media exaggerations. When she hears this, Lorena manages to calm down and asks her husband to keep in touch frequently so that she can be sure he's all right. As the call ends, the businessman feels increasingly stressed and starts reading the news about the recent attacks on his cell phone. At that moment, Claudio hears some screams coming from the corridor, and when he looks outside, he sees several people desperately running for their lives. Soon after, the man is surprised by Marta, who begs him to let her into the cabin, but before she can be rescued by the businessman, the woman is grabbed by her pursuers. In a panic, Claudio tries to hold on to his ex-girlfriend's arms, but his efforts make no difference and Marta ends up being eliminated, leaving the man even more desperate. Trying to understand what's going on, the businessman approaches the doors, but at that moment, he is startled by a pair of zombies who try to break through the opening to devour him. However, the monsters begin to hear the screams of other survivors around the building, and thanks to this, they decide to abandon Claudio, who is completely terrified by what he has just witnessed. Desperate, the man contacts his employee and tries to report everything that is happening, but during the conversation, Stefano ends up having a serious accident, which causes the call to be terminated. Thanks to this, the businessman is even more devastated, and while he is lamenting, he receives a call from the security guard, who says he hasn't found any of his colleagues on the terrace. Trying to save the man's life, Claudio shouts at him to stay in his room, because what they are facing is not a criminal organization, but a collective zombie outbreak. However, the employee doesn't listen to his superior, and when he hears knocks on his office door, he decides to answer the call, causing him to be attacked by the zombies. As a result, the panel's communication stops working, and Claudio feels desolate when he realizes that from now on, he will have to survive on his own, with no guarantee of escaping from that elevator. Sometime later, the man begins to feel increasingly anxious and tries to call his wife so that he can find out if she is still safe. The problem is that the woman doesn't answer his call, and Claudio is devastated because he believes that Lorena may no longer be alive. Suddenly, the man receives a call from Sarah, but as he turns to answer it, he ends up attracting the attention of Marta, who has turned into a zombie. In order to escape the grip, Claudio throws himself backwards and uses the elevator's support bar to strike the woman repeatedly, knocking the creature out in a few seconds. The businessman then uses his water bottle to wash himself after fighting the monster, and soon after, he pushes Marta's body away with his iron bar. Trying to keep his mind sane, the man tears out the pages of his workbook and places the sheets of paper on the floor of the cabin so that he can dry the blood around him. At that moment, Claudio hears someone approaching in the corridors and hides so that he won't be found by the creatures. However, when he looks outside, he realizes that it is actually Sylvia, and after catching her eye, the man tries to calm her down, saying that they can leave the building together. So the businessman asks the woman to help him force the door of the car with the iron bar so that he can free himself from the elevator. After several attempts, the pair manage to widen the passage by a few centimeters, but suddenly Claudio drops the object on the floor, causing a noise that echoes throughout the entire floor. Desperate, the businessman tries to help Sylvia get to the inside of the elevator, but to no avail, and to avoid being caught by the creatures, the woman runs for cover. Just then a furious zombie appears and throws itself on the ground to devour Claudio, who retreats in fright. However, before he could reach his victim, the monster was struck by Sylvia, and after knocking him down, she finished him off with several attacks using a golf club. Impressed by the assistant's bravery, the man congratulates the woman on her courage, and she tells him that she has just destroyed the favorite bat of Mr. Marchini, one of the company's bosses. Upon hearing this, Claudio reveals that the man is none other than the zombie she has just eliminated, causing Sylvia to feel relieved that her job is still safe. Thanks to her distraction, the woman ends up being surprised by a group of the zombies, who start dragging their victim away, and as she is still trapped, the businessman can do nothing to rescue her. A few minutes later, Claudio feels extremely distraught and starts to follow the news on his cell phone, where he discovers that the army has been mobilized due to the chaos in the capital. Worried about his family, the man tries to contact Lorena, who is relieved to discover that her husband is still alive. Distraught, Claudio says that they have no chance of survival and begins to be consoled by his wife. At that moment, Lorena realizes that the house is being invaded by several insane zombies, and calls her husband in a panic. Trying to help her survive, Claudio orders the woman to push the cupboard against the door so that the creature's passage is blocked. Lorena then asks what she can do next, but the businessman admits that he has no idea what they can do, as he is feeling hopeless with everything that is happening. Despite having set up safeguards in the room, the zombies manage to get through the door, forcing Claudio to listen to his wife being eliminated by the zombie. After a while, one of the building's employees walks cautiously through the corridors, and when he comes across the man trapped in the elevator, he asks what's going on. Claudio says he has no idea what could have caused all that chaos, and suggests that the survivor run away before he is found by the creatures, since he can't even help him get into the cabin. At that moment, the employee is surprised by the zombies and runs away to avoid being devoured by the monsters. Hours later, Claudio begins to have a mental breakdown and shouts for all the creatures to come towards him, allowing him to take his anger out on his enemies. In the midst of the chaos, the businessman comes across Sarah, who is being chased by a horde of zombies, and shouts for the woman to hide as quickly as possible. Despite having reached one of the rooms, the secretary is unable to close the door, and in order to save her, Claudio begins to make as much noise as possible, even throwing his watch in the creature's direction. Even so, nothing seems to blur the zombies' attention, and in a few seconds, they manage to invade the place, causing Sarah to be devoured by dozens of them. With so many losses in a single day, the businessman begins to lose hope, as he can no longer bear to witness attacks on countless innocent people right in front of him. In order to stay informed about the zombie attacks, the man uses his cell phone to follow the news, and during his searches, he finds a video of a surviving reporter. In the recording, the woman reveals that all police units are confronting the threats, and says that the people of Rome should leave the city as soon as possible. During her warnings, the journalist ends up being surprised by a pair of zombies, and before she can escape, she is attacked by the creatures, who eliminate her instantly. Thanks to the noises coming from Claudio's device, the monsters return to the elevator door, where they try to get through the opening to devour the survivor. At the same time, the building's power is turned off, causing the cabin to be engulfed in darkness. Soon afterwards, the zombies are eliminated by a shotgun blast, and believing that it might be a policeman, Claudio shouts for him to be found. The man soon comes across an elite soldier who claims to have lost contact with his headquarters, as well as losing all the members of his team. At that moment, Claudio notices that one of the zombies is getting up, and alerts the fighter, who manages to block the attacks, allowing him to fire at the monster. Realizing that they won't be able to open the doors by themselves, the soldier decides to go to the terrace so that he can try to start the generator and rescue the man. Before leaving, the agent reveals that his name is Marcelo, and so that Claudio can guide him to the roof, he hands him one of his walkie-talkies. The soldier also hands the businessman his pistol, and after explaining how the weapon works, he off towards his goal. While waiting for Marcelo to return, Claudio begins to hear some shots in the distance, and talks to the agent through his radio, asking what is going on. The soldier then reveals that he came across 4 zombies along the way, but managed to eliminate each of them without difficulty. On the 9th floor, Marcelo explains that it won't be possible to reach the terrace, as several pieces of furniture have been placed on the stairs to act as a kind of protective barrier. Hearing this, Claudio thinks for a moment, remembering that the 9th floor was undergoing some renovations, and realizes that there must still be scaffolding outside. So the soldier heads for one of the rooms and claims to have found the platforms left by the workers. Now that he is on a new floor, Marcelo asks Claudio to remain silent, as he is about to cross an area full of zombies. A few seconds later, the man confirms that he has found the exit to the terrace, and the businessman warns him about the attacks that took place earlier, telling him to be very careful when opening the door. Marcelo then reaches the power panel, allowing him to restore the building's electricity, but as soon as the cabin is reactivated, Claudio notices that something seems to be blocking the doors. Curious, the man uses his cell phone as a flashlight and begins to investigate, but before he can find out anything, he is surprised by yet another zombie. Trying to protect himself, Claudio attacks the creature with his gun, and even after missing a few shots, he manages to eliminate his target. However, this only causes even more zombies to appear at the elevator door, and noticing the survivor's desperation, Marcelo shouts for him to pull himself together. Claudio then uses his pistol to eliminate each of the zombies, and believes that he has just become a great criminal, since all the infected he has finished were his work colleagues. In order to calm the businessman down, the soldier says that the infected people will never return to normal, so all they are facing are monsters that look human. At that moment, Marcelo starts screaming, and before Claudio can understand what's going on, the fighter ends up being eliminated by the zombies, who destroy his walkie-talkie at the same time. Now that he is completely alone, the survivor tries to distract his mind, and after learning a little more about his weapon, he revisits some photos of his late wife. Suddenly, Claudio comes across a group of fighters who are running through the building while shooting at the zombies, but thanks to the noise, he can't attract their attention. By nightfall, the businessman no longer has any will to survive, and so that he can put an end to his suffering, he decides to put an end to everything. Terrified by the action he is about to take, the man starts screaming desperately, causing several zombies to come to the elevator door. Claudio then says that he won't have the pleasure of being eliminated by them, and prepares to put an end to everything. However, before he could do so, he heard the call of Marcelo, who had managed to escape from the creatures and descend to the roof of the cabin via the steel cables. In order to open a passage for the fighter, Claudio uses the iron bar to push the elevator hatch, allowing the man to reach the inside. Marcelo then uses his shotgun to eliminate each of the zombies, and now that they are safe, he sits down on the ground next to his friend. Claudio asks what happened on the terrace, and the soul reveals that even after managing to escape from the monsters, he ended up being bitten on the leg. Realizing that they won't be able to escape from that place, the pair sit on the floor to reflect on their last remaining hours of life, and the businessman asks how it all started to happen. Marcelo reveals that the attacks have been going on since early this morning, and after just a few hours on the mission, he had already lost all communication with his team. Saddened, the men begin to talk about their wives, and Claudio says that he regrets everything he has caused in Lorena's life, since he couldn't even protect her in her last seconds of life. A few minutes later, Marcelo starts coughing non-stop, and noticing that his body and organism are changing drastically, he tells him that he's going to lie down for a while so that he can rest. In addition, the soldier orders Claudio to keep his gun, because as soon as he notices that he is unconscious, the businessman will have to shoot him twice in the head. However, the survivor refuses and Marcelo says that if his friend doesn't help him, he'll do it alone. Hearing this, Claudio despairs and tries to stop the soldier, who strikes him in the face, causing him to be stunned. As a result of the strain he has put on his body, Marcelo is even weaker and ends up giving up on his decision. A few hours later, the city is completely abandoned, since by this point, almost the entire population of Rome has been wiped out by the attack of the ferocious zombies. In the elevator, the soldier's condition gets worse and worse, but even though Claudio notices the serious condition the man is in, he refuses to finish him off. Suddenly, Marcello's wound begins to ooze goo, and now that his body has been completely infected, the pathogen begins to transform the man. So the soldier ends up becoming another zombie, and before he can react, Claudio is grabbed by him. As a result of being pushed by the monster, the businessman shoots himself in the leg, and in order not to be bitten, he shoots Marcello in the body, which makes him move away. Claudio then hits the zombie soldier in the head with his gun, and after firing the second shot his friend had asked for, he ends up attracting the attention of more creatures. To stop the bleeding, the man uses his tie to make a tourniquet on his leg, allowing the wound to be controlled. Realizing that his pistol has run out of ammunition, the survivor uses Marcello's shotgun to confront the monsters, but the recoil of the weapon causes him to hit the wall and fall unconscious. At dawn, Claudio wakes up to the shots of other people exploring the building, but this time he doesn't even try to shout for help, but remains silent as he surveys the corridors. At that moment, the businessman's cell phone starts ringing, and after retrieving the device, he is faced with a call from an unknown number. When he answers the call, Claudio discovers that this is Lorena, and the woman says that she was rescued by a group of soldiers because she managed to run outside the house before she was caught by the zombies. After hearing his wife's voice and discovering that she is still alive, the survivor is extremely moved, but before they can continue the conversation, the cell phone battery runs out, interrupting the call. Determined to get out of that place, Claudio uses the iron bar to reopen the cabin door, and after climbing on top of Marcello's body, he manages to grab the object that had caused all this. Thanks to this, the businessman finally manages to free himself from the elevator, and after preparing his equipment, he sets off towards the exit. In the lobby of the building, Claudio comes across all the victims eliminated by the zombies, and as he walks, he realizes that one of the creatures is still alive, but its legs have been removed from its body. As he has no more ammunition in his shotgun, the man decides to finish the monster off with his feet, and after leaving the building, he walks through the city, which has been destroyed by the apocalypse. During the journey, Claudio comes across some food left next to the body of one of the zombies, but when he tries to pick it up, he realizes that the creature is still alive, and tries to back away so that he doesn't get bitten. At that moment, the zombies are shot by a soldier, and as he looks at the buildings around him, the survivor is extremely happy that he has been found by the military. Finally, Claudio signals his location to the sharpshooters and anxiously awaits his rescue, feeling thrilled to realize that he will finally be able to see his wife again. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.